All right, everybody. I'd like to say welcome, welcome, welcome. Today is today as we celebrate 64 years of Hurricane Carla. September the 11th, 1961 was the last time we here in Houston and here on the Gulf Coast had a Category 5 hurricane. First of all, I'd like to take this time out to wish my big brother, William Harvey Sr., out there in Arkansas, a happy birthday today. Now, as we go here and talk about Hurricane Carla in 1961, but now let's go back 61 years later to 1900, when Galveston was bigger than Houston, and the major hurricane came. That means a hurricane came in 1900 right here on the Gulf of Mexico in Galveston, and it took 8,000 lives. You hear me? 8,000 lives that is had lost during Hurricane 1900 right here on the Gulf of Mexico and right here in Galveston. This was before they built the seawall, y'all. In fact, that started them to building the seawall, and that's where we at now, on the seawall. Now, as we talk about, let me get up a little closer. As we talk about hurricane here, and we're in the hurricane season, and after all, hurricane season don't end until November. But now, we don't know, because the hurricane we had last year came in July. And that's the first time we ever had a hurricane to come in July. Most hurricanes do come in August and September. But nobody can predict the weather. You know, that's God's work. But as we talk about Hurricane Carla and the impact it had on the Gulf of Mexico here. Now, when Hurricane Carla came through here, now they had built the seawall, but Hurricane Carla was so powerful, it was listed as a Category 5. It was so powerful, it was tearing down the seawall. It was going over the seawall. That's how powerful Hurricane Carla was. And we here today to celebrate 64 years of Hurricane Carla. But now, as we talk about the hurricanes that we had here, first of all, they started naming hurricanes in 1950. So it was 11 years later when Hurricane Carla came through here. Because in 1950 and before 1950, they didn't have a name for hurricanes, they just called them hurricanes. But in 1950, they started naming hurricanes, and that's when Hurricane Carla came 11 years later in 1961 on November the 11th. Now, as we talk about 9/11, which is September the 11th, let's also remember what happened in 2001 when they had that great airplane flying to the buildings up there in New York. But today we're talking about hurricanes, because we still got 2 more months of hurricanes, and all the hurricanes starts right here on the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, it started when the Gulf of Mexico meet up with the Atlantic Ocean up there in Florida. And as we sit here and talk about the hurricanes, and like I say, Hurricane Harvey that came, that we all remember, it was a Hurricane 4. Even Hurricane Bureau was listed as a Hurricane 4. And now Alicia was a Hurricane 4. Ike, that came in 2012, was a Hurricane 4. The major hurricanes we had, the last Category 5 was in 1961, and it was right out here called Hurricane Carla. But now, as we talk about these hurricanes, and we're in the hurricane season, you know, first of all, when the Gulf meet up with the Atlantic Ocean up there in the Florida Keys, most of the hurricanes flow out of the Gulf. Now, the 2 major rivers out of the Gulf that feeds into the Gulf, number one is the Mississippi River. That's why they get a big impact on most of the hurricanes come through here up in New Orleans and Louisiana. Now, on the other side, we also have the hurricane here in Texas that feeds into the Gulf. Our big river that flows into the Gulf, which is the Brazos River, which is the 11th largest river in the country. And it is the #1 largest river in the United States. And it feeds into the Gulf, but it feeds into the Gulf on the other side of the Gulf, which is Freeport.